The front door to my apartment stuck like always. I should have sanded the frame down months ago. I should have done a lot of things. The hallway light flickered and fizzled into nothing as I stepped over a pile of unopened mail and made my way to the fridge. Inside, the air smelled like old mustard and aluminium, and it lingered in the air too long, even when closed. I pulled out the last microwave meal and peeled back the corner of the film, then watched as the tray stuttered left to right on top of the cracked turntable of my microwave, making it hot around the corners and frozen on the inside. I passed the kitchen table on my way to the bedroom and dropped my keys like usual. The metal clinked against something soft, and the whole tablecloth shifted sideways. I paused and looked down, noticing a round lump beneath the fabric. I thought maybe it was something my ex had left behind, maybe a button or a marble that had rolled under and been forgotten. So, I pulled the mat up. The second I saw it, I recoiled. My heel caught the chair leg and I nearly fell backwards. My heart almost skipped a beat as I stood in shock, gripping the table's edge while trying to make sense of the sight in front of me. There was a fully formed human eye, wet, detailed, and embedded in the wood. The skin around it was faint and translucent, barely raised, but enough to show it wasn't drawn or carved. It also seemed to blink. I stared at it, expecting it to vanish, to prove itself as some trick of the light or exhaustion. But it didn't. The thing stayed there, staring straight up at me, the pupil shifting slightly as if adjusting to the angle of my shadow. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a fungus, some kind of growth that reacted to heat or light. Maybe moisture in the wood was making it warp, and my mind filled in the rest. That was possible, wasn't it? I squinted and leaned a little. It had a light blue iris that shot through with broken red veins. There was a little milky film along the edges. My scalp prickled, but I forced myself to breathe steadily. I pressed the tablecloth down again, flattening it over the thing, hoping it would disappear. But when the lump remained, I couldn't help mess with it. I grabbed a spoon from the drawer and tried prying the eye, but it didn't work. I couldn't get it wedged, and any effort to damage whatever had taken the shape of an eye proved pointless. So I just gave up. At least I could say I tried getting rid of it on my own. I placed the cloth back over it and tried forgetting. I'd call someone. Not now, but maybe later in the week. I didn't have the cash to throw around on some specialist, and it didn't look dangerous. I hadn't been hallucinating at work or anything. I'd been eating fine, sleeping enough more or less. Whatever it wasn't hurting me. I woke up later than I should have, and as I shuffled to the bathroom to brush my teeth, I remembered the lump. So I snuck a glance at the table again. The tablecloth had another bulge under it now. 2 raised shapes pressed through the cloth side by side, distorting the fabric. I already had a feeling as to what would be there. But I forced myself to keep moving. I wiped my mouth, stepped back into the bedroom, and got dressed. I poured a half cup of bitter coffee from the cold pot and locked the door behind me without glancing at the table. I didn't need any additional stress. I'd get rid of it, eventually. Things were worse at work. Someone had botched the inventory numbers in the overnight batch, which meant none of the reports matched the previous week. I couldn't fix it without re-entering everything by hand. Plus, the office was full of complaints before I even got my headset on. I kept getting yelled at, and it didn't help that I couldn't forget about the kitchen table. I tried not to. I knew how much a full mold treatment would cost. They'd have to come in, tear part of the surface out, spray the place down, and maybe even inspect the drywall. The table was cheap, but not something I could replace right now, and I really didn't want to throw it away. I didn't have time for this. I needed that table to not be turning into some weird freaking biology exhibit in my kitchen. When I eventually returned, the air in my apartment felt heavier and the window had fogged up again. I headed toward the kitchen to pour a glass of water while I tried my best not to look at the table. But my curiosity got the best of me, and I caught sight of the tablecloth in the corner of my eye. It was raised more than it was that morning. The entire surface was covered in bulges, maybe a dozen or so. So I peeled it back. A collection of eyes stared back at me. Some were wide and alert, others moved slowly, blinking with effort. There were brown ones and hazel, and some flat grey, others nearly violet. A few were bright red around the edges, veined and swollen. One had long lashes, another was clouded with a pale film. It was spreading like some form of mold or fungus, so I opened my laptop and typed out mold inspection near me. The top result looked professional. There was a chat box open already, offering a quote. I clicked out of it. The price was more than I had to spare. My next paycheck wouldn't come through for another 5 days, so I closed the tab. I went to bed without brushing my teeth. Sleep didn't come easy. My body kept twitching like it wanted to stay awake. I flipped the pillow twice and tried lying on my stomach. The sheets were damp with old sweat. At some point, I must have passed out. In the morning, when I stretched, I felt it immediately. My back wasn't pressing against fabric. It was uneven and damp in places. The weight across my ribs shifted. Something was underneath me. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe slowly, making the sensation disappear weirdly enough. When I opened them, however, it returned. I sat up fast and threw the blanket off. The mattress was covered in eyes. They stretched from the headboard to the foot, some tucked near the corners, others exposed across the surface. I could see the indents where I'd slept across them. Some had left wet trails, others blinked up at me lazily, their lids crusted with yellow discharge. One followed my movement as I stepped back. I gagged, but nothing came up. I looked around the room. Nothing else had changed. The walls were clean, the floor was fine. I stared back down at the bed. It was getting out of control. Was this even a fungus? What was I looking at? It just didn't make sense. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the phone. My fingers slipped on the screen once, but I managed to book a late-night slot with a mold removal specialist. The quote they gave me made my stomach twist, but I didn't argue. I gave my address and said I'd be home after 7. I got dressed in silence. Work meant nothing that day. I sat in my chair, stared at the numbers on the screen, and answered one call, maybe 2. The rest blurred. Every few minutes, I thought I saw something twitch in the corner of the monitor. I ended up leaving 2 hours early without permission. I needed to be there when the exterminator arrived. The sun had dropped below the buildings when the exterminator and I met. I pulled up outside and he stood there, already looking worn out. The guy looked mid-40s, with a thick coat zipped halfway and a clipboard tucked under one arm. His spray tank had dried streaks down the side. He nodded, asked if I was the guy, and I led the way. Then, I saw the apartment. I paused in the doorway. The eyes had taken over everything. They covered the backsplash behind the sink, nested in the gaps between counter tiles, and split from half-open drawers. The coffee maker had one in the reservoir, partially submerged. A few had stuck to the inside of the fridge door. One blinked slowly and quietly between a ketchup bottle and a box of baking soda. The worst were the clusters. They started forming small bunches, growing in tight patches. One whole corner of the ceiling looked swollen with them, blinking at odd intervals. Some had red-rimmed lids, others were cracked through the iris. I didn't say anything. I didn't have words for it anymore. "Everything all right, sir?" the exterminator asked, finally. I turned toward him. I stared too long before answering. "You don't see all this?" He looked around again, slower this time. His eyes passed over the sink, the walls, and the table. I watched for a change in his expression. There was none. "See what exactly?" he asked. He said it carefully and politely, trying not to set anything off. I looked back at the room. One of the eyes on the cabinet had started to leak. The liquid was thick, pale yellow, and it ran down the handle toward the floor. I wiped my palms on my pants. "Do your thing, I guess," I said. He nodded, adjusted the pressure valve on his tank, and started spraying. When the spray hit the eyes, I waited for a reaction, but the eyes didn't seem to react to it. "Should clear up by morning," he said once he finished the perimeter. "You'll want to keep the windows open if you can. Air it out overnight." He handed me a receipt. I tapped through the payment screen on his phone. He walked away, and the door clicked softly behind him. I stood there for a few seconds, then turned and walked straight to the bedroom. Surely they'd be gone soon, just like he said. The bed was still a mess of pupils and lashes. I pulled a thick quilt from the closet, threw it over the mattress, and added an old comforter. I pushed down hard across the fabric. I couldn't see them anymore, but I knew they were there. I lay down on top of the layers. I could still feel them, but when I closed my eyes, the pressure vanished. The twitching beneath my back disappeared. When I opened my eyes again, the pressure came back, a slow return of weight along my spine, tensing under my shoulder blades. I sat up fast and looked down. The eyes had pushed through the padding, stretching the quilt fabric. They blinked at me through the threads. And then, an idea popped into my head. I closed my eyes and immediately felt the pressure underneath me disappear. When I opened my eyes again, the eyes reappeared. I didn't know what to do with that. Sure, I couldn't feel or see them when I closed my eyes, but it didn't change much. But at least I could sleep, mostly undisturbed. That was something. When I woke up, the entire apartment was buried in them. There wasn't a single surface left untouched. The ceiling was dense with them, some fused together, lids tangled into swollen folds that blinked out of sync. The walls had eyes where the paint had cracked years ago. Some nested along the doorframe. I stepped off the bed and into a field of them. I tried walking slowly, but it didn't help. I closed my eyes and tried to navigate through my apartment blind. I managed to pull it off and got outside, though on the outside, things weren't better. The sidewalk had begun to change. They were tucked between the cracks in the concrete. One blinked from the inside of a broken soda can. A few were staring from the storm drain. I walked fast to my car. When I got to work, I went straight to my desk. The monitor was already on. There was an eye on the screen itself, faint behind the glare. I sat down and tried to open the call dashboard. I didn't get far. Someone tapped my shoulder. It was the assistant manager. "You're wanted in the back." I followed them down the hallway. He was sitting at his desk, hands folded, face still. He used to be clean-cut. Now he looked swollen. He'd always had a ruddy complexion, but his cheeks were rippling. Under the skin, something was pushing forward. The folds of his neck moved. He stood up and walked toward me. His chest shifted under the shirt. Pockets of skin bulged, then opened. Eyes blinked from his sternum. I could see them from the fabric of the shirt. 2 more peeled from under his collar. His gums had them too. Each time he moved his jaw, pale fluid slipped from the corners of his lips. It ran down his chin, caught in his tie. He opened his mouth. It was filled with eyes that leaked pus. He said something, though I couldn't hear it. I was too distracted by the abomination he had become. He said it again, louder. "Are you even listening? What the hell's wrong with you lately?" I blinked hard. Huh? He stared for a second, then his voice dropped. "Get out." I didn't argue. I got to the parking lot and stopped beside the car. The eyes had gotten inside. The seat was lined with them. The steering wheel had them wrapped through the leather. One looked out from the base of the air vent. The rearview mirror was covered, the lenses facing inward. I couldn't drive even if I wanted to. I turned around and walked. The neighborhood looked bent out of shape. A stop sign had a ring of eyes running around its rim. The bus stop had them in the glass. A kid near the corner bent down and pulled something from the grass. She held it up to show a mother. It looked like a white daisy at first, until it blinked. A blue iris sat in the middle of the petals, unblinking in a palm. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. When I got home, I had to shoulder the door open. It resisted for a moment, then gave. I stepped inside carefully. There were more now, thicker clusters. The table had sprouted an entire patch of them, eyelids tangled into another, shifting in a wave across the surface. I reached my chair and sat down. It was covered too. They pressed into my legs, my back, the base of my spine. I didn't care. I closed my eyes, and they disappeared. I kept my eyes shut for a long time. I breathed in through my nose and waited for the tension to ease out of my shoulders. I knew what I had to do. I'd known for a while. I could make them disappear. I stood up. My knees cracked under the weight of it all. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer under the cutlery. I had to dig under old spatulas and dull knives to find what I needed. A spoon. It had dried sauce on the edge, but the shape was right. I placed it on the counter. Next drawer, I found the scissors at the back, past a ball of twine and a melted flashlight. The blades were half rusted, but they opened clean enough. I stared at both for a moment. The metal felt cold against my skin. Then, I walked to the bathroom. I sat on the countless eyes covering my bathroom floor. I held the phone in my hand and dialed emergency. My thumb hovered over the call button for a second before pressing down. "I'm hurt," I said when the dispatcher picked up. "Severe bleeding. I'm on the floor. I don't think I'll stay conscious for long." They asked questions. I gave my address. I ended the call before they could say anything else. I leaned back against the tub and took the spoon in one hand. The scissors lay across my lap. I blinked once, slow and heavy, then raised the spoon. I pressed it into the bone just beneath my eye. The pressure sent sparks up my spine. I slipped the rim upward, forcing it behind the socket. It didn't slide clean. My hands were shaking. The first movement gouged into the flesh above the lid. The skin tore away. Warm blood streaked down my face. The pain didn't make me stop. I dug deeper. The handle braced against my jaw. I grunted, screamed. My shoulder locked. The eye fought back, wobbling in place, pushing outward. I screamed again and pulled harder. There was a wet pop, and the eyeball dislodged, but stayed connected by something deep and sinewy. I could still see through it. It dangled against my cheek. I grabbed the scissors. My fingers slipped. The first cut missed. I clipped the skin. The second one caught the optic cord halfway. I pressed the blades together. The snip wasn't clean. It felt like trying to chew rubber. When the connection severed, everything went dark on one side as a wet mass hit the floor. I panted hard, bracing for the second. The other eye took longer. I slipped twice. My vision kept blurring. The metal tore through the socket wall, and I ripped the lid off without meaning to. The bulb pushed forward on its own. I stabbed deep. Something in my head cracked, and my nose started bleeding. The eye split as I pulled. When it was out, I held the pieces in my lap. Everything was black. I slumped forward. My arms slid out under me. The spoon clattered away somewhere behind the toilet. I could hear sirens. The blood soaked into my sleeves and pooled beneath my jaw. But at least I couldn't feel or see those eyes anymore. When I woke up, the world was quiet. My face was wrapped in gauze. My body was stiff, but the pain had dulled into a deep throb. I could breathe clearly again. I knew I was in a hospital bed. I could hear the faint beep of a monitor and the low hum of machines. The door opened and somebody stepped in. "You made it through," she said. "You lost a lot of blood. You're stable now, but you won't be seeing again." I didn't say anything. She walked closer and adjusted the monitor. They couldn't save the eyelids either. They were torn past repair. It means blinking won't be possible, so you'll just need to get adjusted to everything. Still, I didn't speak. I listened to the shuffling of her shoes against the floor. I imagined the light above my bed, flickering the way hospital lights always do. She walked out, closing the door behind her. I lay still. At first, I felt peace. Then, the mattress shifted. It was slow, barely there, arise under my back. I didn't have to see them to know. They were here. I held still, my throat tightened. I could feel the shapes beneath me moving, swelling upward, slow and certain. I could feel their gaze through the layers. But I couldn't see. That had been the rule. That had always been the rule. So why were they back? Was it ever about sight? Or was it about closing my eyes?